Thinking Fast and Slow, written by Patrick Egan. Summarized by Detailed Book Summaries. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you did, welcome to our book family. Chapter 1. The Two Minds at Work. From the moment we wake up to the instant we fall asleep, our minds are engaged in a constant balancing act between two ways of thinking, what Patrick Egan calls the dual system of human cognition. The first system, which he refers to as System 1, operates rapidly, automatically, and effortlessly. It is the brain's intuitive engine, responsible for snap judgments, immediate reactions, and the invisible calculations that guide our daily lives without conscious effort. Imagine walking down a familiar street. System 1 recognizes faces, avoids obstacles, and reacts to sudden changes almost instantly. It is emotional, instinctive, and prone to heuristics, mental shortcuts that allow us to make fast decisions, often without us even realizing it. This system is what enables us to sense danger in a fraction of a second, detect a friend's mood from a fleeting glance, or quickly solve simple arithmetic like 2 plus 2, almost reflexively. Contrastingly, System 2 is deliberate, effortful, and analytical. It governs reasoning, logic, and the careful consideration of options. This system is slower because it requires conscious attention and mental energy. When solving complex mathematical problems, making major life decisions, or weighing trade-offs in investments, System 2 takes the reins. Unlike System 1, it monitors and evaluates the intuitive impulses generated by its faster counterpart. Yet, because System 2 is resource-intensive, it is often lazy. We default to the ease of System 1 unless a situation demands careful scrutiny. Egan explains that this duality is not merely academic. It governs how we navigate every sphere of life, from finance and politics to relationships and personal choices. Egan emphasizes that this interplay explains much of human inconsistency. For instance, we can be perfectly rational in one context, calculating the best route to work or the optimal recipe for a meal, yet fall prey to irrational biases in another, such as overestimating small probabilities or trusting a gut feeling that contradicts evidence. System 1's speed comes at a cost. It is prone to errors, illusions, and misjudgments. Cognitive biases, systematic deviations from rationality, arise from the mind's dependence on mental shortcuts. Anchoring, availability bias, and framing effects are not flaws, but the natural byproducts of a mind optimized for efficiency rather than perfection. Egan's discussion moves beyond mere description. He introduces the concept of the experiencing self versus the remembering self, revealing that even our perception of life events is filtered through these two cognitive lenses. Our memories do not record experiences like a video camera. Instead, System 2 reconstructs and evaluates, often prioritizing emotional peaks or endings over the totality of an event. This explains why a vacation might feel wonderful while it is happening, yet the memory we recall later may highlight only the most exhilarating or frustrating moments. Understanding this cognitive architecture is crucial because it shapes how we perceive happiness, make decisions, and even forecast our future desires. The chapter also highlights the concept of attention as a finite resource. System 2 is not only slow but easily exhausted. Mental effort depletes our cognitive stamina. Tasks requiring focus, such as carefully reviewing a contract or learning a new skill, consume this precious resource. As it tires, we rely more heavily on System 1, increasing the likelihood of bias-driven decisions. Egan illustrates this with simple experiments. Participants asked to resist temptation or engage in intensive reasoning later perform worse on unrelated cognitive tasks, revealing how our mental energy is a limited commodity that can subtly influence our choices throughout the day. Egan's narrative does not stop at theory. He weaves real-world examples to illuminate the practical consequences of these two systems. In financial markets, System 1 can prompt an investor to panic sell during a dip, while System 2, if engaged, might recognize the dip as a temporary fluctuation, advocating patience. In social interactions, System 1's instantaneous judgments about trustworthiness or likability can lead to snap decisions that System 2 would carefully question. Even in the realm of policymaking and public health, Understanding the tug-of-war between intuition and reasoning can explain why people resist rational advice or adopt seemingly irrational behaviors. By the end of this chapter, Egan makes a compelling case for awareness. Recognizing the interplay between System 1 and System 2 is not merely an academic exercise. It is the first step toward better thinking. By learning to identify when intuition is reliable and when deliberation is necessary, individuals can navigate life more wisely, reduce errors, and harness the strengths of both cognitive modes. He sets the stage for the rest of the book, suggesting that understanding these mental systems provides the key to decoding human behavior, predicting decisions, and ultimately designing strategies that align thought with reality. The chapter closes with a clear reminder. Human thinking is not purely rational, but it is predictable, and predictability is the foundation of understanding, improvement, and smarter living. Chapter 2, Heuristics and Biases, How the Mind Shortcuts Reality. As we move deeper into Patrick Egan's exploration of human thought, Chapter 2 plunges into the fascinating terrain of heuristics and cognitive biases, revealing the hidden rules and shortcuts that govern much of our daily reasoning. While System 1 gives us speed and efficiency, it also makes judgments based on incomplete information, using patterns and associations rather than careful analysis. These mental shortcuts, known as heuristics, are often useful, allowing us to function in a complex world without being paralyzed by uncertainty. Yet, as Egan warns, they are double-edged swords. The very mechanisms that allow us to navigate life efficiently also open the door to systematic errors, predictable mistakes, and irrational choices. Egan introduces the availability heuristic, one of the most intuitive examples of how System 1 can mislead us. Our brains are wired to assess the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. If we recently saw a news story about a plane crash, we might overestimate the danger of flying, even though statistically air travel is far safer than driving. The vividness of certain experiences or media coverage can distort our perception of risk. Similarly, we might underestimate the danger of everyday activities that are mundane and uneventful because System 1 finds little memorable evidence of harm. This heuristic explains why people fear dramatic but rare risks while ignoring more common threats, influencing behavior from insurance decisions to public policy preferences. Closely tied to this is the representativeness heuristic, which shapes how we classify and judge events or people. Egan describes how System 1 often judges probability based on similarity to stereotypes rather than actual statistics. For example, if someone is quiet and meticulous, we might assume they are more likely to be a librarian than a salesperson, ignoring the relative prevalence of each profession. This tendency leads to errors known as the base rate neglect, where we dismiss real-world probabilities in favor of a story that feels right. The result is a mind that favors narrative coherence over statistical reality, producing judgments that are elegant in appearance but flawed in truth. Anchoring, another powerful bias Egan explores, illustrates the subtle ways initial information can shape subsequent decisions. When making estimates or judgments, people are unconsciously influenced by the first number or suggestion they encounter, the anchor, even if it is irrelevant. For instance, in negotiations, the first offer often sets the tone for the final agreement. System 1 latches onto that anchor, while System 2 may struggle to fully correct for it, demonstrating how even rational deliberation can be swayed by intuition. Anchoring is not confined to numbers. It affects opinions, attitudes, and even perceptions of risk, shaping our interactions in ways we rarely notice. Egan emphasizes that loss aversion is perhaps the most consequential bias revealed in this chapter. Rooted in the asymmetry of our emotional responses, humans feel the pain of losses more acutely than the pleasure of gains of equivalent magnitude. Losing $100, for example, feels worse than the satisfaction of gaining $100. This principle, central to prospect theory developed by Kahneman and Tversky, explains why investors hold onto declining stocks, why people hesitate to change careers, and why we cling to familiar routines even when better options exist. Loss aversion operates silently, steering decisions without conscious awareness, and System 1 is its primary agent, reacting instinctively to the fear of losing rather than the potential for gain. Framing effects are another demonstration of how System 1 dominates perception. How a question or problem is presented, the frame, can drastically alter decisions. A surgery with a 90% survival rate sounds appealing, while the same surgery described as having a 10% mortality rate sparks fear, even though the statistical reality is identical. Egan's examples show that preferences are not fixed. They are malleable, shaped by the context in which choices are presented. System 2 can sometimes recognize this manipulation and correct for it, but only if it is actively engaged. Otherwise, intuitive reactions prevail, reinforcing the idea that perception and decision-making are inseparable from presentation. Egan also examines overconfidence, a bias arising when System 1's fluency in generating coherent stories leads people to believe they understand more than they actually do. Professionals, investors, and even casual observers routinely overestimate their knowledge or predictive ability. System 1, eager for certainty, fills in gaps with plausible but unverified narratives. System 2, if inattentive or fatigued, fails to critically evaluate these stories, leading to errors in judgment, planning, and forecasting. This overconfidence is compounded by hindsight bias, the tendency to see past events as predictable once they have occurred, creating the illusion of foresight and reinforcing false confidence in our cognitive abilities. Importantly, Egan frames these biases not as flaws to be eliminated, but as features of a mind optimized for speed and survival. In environments where rapid decisions are necessary, heuristics often outperform deliberate calculation. Yet modern life frequently demands accuracy, long-term planning, and nuanced evaluation, domains where the shortcuts of System 1 become liabilities. Understanding these patterns allows us to anticipate errors, design better decision processes, and structure environments that reduce the harmful influence of bias. Egan concludes the chapter by stressing the interplay between intuition and reasoning in shaping judgment. He demonstrates through experiments how small adjustments, such as prompting individuals to pause and engage System 2, or restructuring information presentation, can dramatically reduce the errors introduced by heuristics. This insight has profound implications, from personal finance and business strategy to healthcare and policy design. By learning when to trust intuition and when to deliberate, individuals can harness the strengths of both cognitive systems, navigating a world where instinct and analysis must coexist. The chapter closes with a striking realization. The human mind is neither wholly rational nor irrational. It is an adaptive system, optimized for speed, pattern recognition, and survival in complex environments. By recognizing our biases and understanding their origins, we gain the tools not only to correct errors, but to structure our decisions intentionally, reducing the silent influence of cognitive shortcuts. Awareness becomes the first step toward mastery over our thinking, a theme that Egan will continue to expand throughout the rest of the book. Chapter 3, Overconfidence and the Illusion of Understanding. Chapter 3 delves into one of the most profound insights of human cognition, our tendency toward overconfidence and the illusion that we understand more than we actually do. Patrick Egan carefully dissects how System 1, with its fluency and rapid-fire pattern recognition, fosters a sense of certainty even when the evidence is incomplete or misleading. This chapter reveals how our minds construct stories to explain the past, predict the future, and justify actions, and in doing so, often deceive us about the limits of our knowledge. Egan begins by highlighting the illusion of validity, which occurs when our brains produce a coherent narrative about events or outcomes. When System 1 interprets patterns and fills in missing information, it generates an explanation that feels correct, even if it is largely speculative. For instance, an investor may see a stock steadily rising and construct a compelling story about the company's innovation, ignoring market volatility or statistical evidence that suggests future decline. Because the story feels logical, System 1 signals certainty, and System 2 often accepts this signal without scrutiny. The result is overconfidence, the belief that we understand a situation far better than we truly do. Egan underscores that this overconfidence is pervasive, affecting professionals, experts, and ordinary people alike. Doctors may overestimate the accuracy of diagnoses based on limited symptoms. Managers may assume they can forecast market trends, and individuals often misjudge the likelihood of personal success in ventures or projects. The chapter cites experiments demonstrating how experts in fields like economics, medicine, or weather forecasting frequently fail to outperform simple statistical models, despite their experience. The human mind, Egan argues, is adept at storytelling but notoriously poor at probabilistic reasoning. Our sense of understanding is more a reflection of narrative coherence than empirical accuracy. Closely related is the hindsight bias, the tendency to see past events as having been predictable after they have occurred. This bias reinforces overconfidence because it gives us the illusion that we knew it all along. For example, after a financial crisis, many analysts claim that warning signs were obvious, even though few predicted the events beforehand. System 1 reconstructs memories to fit coherent stories, smoothing over uncertainty and making outcomes appear inevitable. This not only skews our perception of the past, but also shapes future decisions, as we believe our past judgments were more accurate than they really were. Egan explores how intuition, when grounded in genuine expertise, can be remarkably effective, but only under specific conditions. True intuition arises from repeated exposure to stable patterns within a predictable environment. A chess master, for instance, can instantly recognize effective moves because years of experience have trained System 1 to recognize subtle configurations. Similarly, a firefighter may instinctively sense the structural instability of a building based on repeated encounters with similar situations. In these cases, intuition is fast, reliable, and accurate. However, in unpredictable or complex environments, the same intuitive processes lead to systematic errors. Novices may feel just as confident as experts, yet lack the necessary experience for their instincts to be trustworthy. Egan also introduces the planning fallacy, a pervasive form of overconfidence in which individuals underestimate the time, cost, and risks associated with future projects. People routinely assume that tasks will take less time than historical evidence suggests, often ignoring past failures. System 1, optimistic and eager to predict favorable outcomes, produces a narrative of efficiency and success, while System 2 fails to critically evaluate and incorporate statistical reality. This bias is evident in large-scale projects, such as construction, software development, or infrastructure, where timelines and budgets are consistently exceeded. Understanding this phenomenon is crucial because it demonstrates that overconfidence is not merely about inflated ego. It is a structural feature of human cognition, deeply embedded in the interplay between intuition and reasoning. Another key insight is the illusion of skill versus luck. Egan explains that people frequently attribute success to personal ability rather than acknowledging the role of chance. In financial markets, athletes, performance, or entrepreneurial ventures, outcomes are often a combination of skill, preparation, and random events. Yet our minds are wired to credit skill and create causal explanations. This leads to persistent overestimation of one's abilities and can have significant consequences, from poor investment decisions to mismanagement of teams or organizations. Recognizing the contribution of randomness and uncertainty is critical for mitigating overconfidence. Egan emphasizes that managing overconfidence requires deliberate engagement of System 2. By questioning initial intuitions, considering alternative explanations, and seeking statistical evidence, we can counteract the deceptive clarity of System 1. Tools such as checklists, pre-mortem analyses, and scenario planning are practical ways to introduce rigor and reduce the influence of bias. The chapter illustrates that awareness alone is not enough. Structured thinking processes are necessary to counteract the seductive confidence generated by intuitive reasoning. Finally, Egan links overconfidence to decision-making under uncertainty, showing how it shapes behavior in finance, politics, and personal life. We are prone to underestimate risks, overcommit to strategies, and misread signals from the environment, often with long-lasting consequences. Yet overconfidence is not entirely detrimental. It fuels ambition, motivates action, and drives exploration. The challenge lies in balancing boldness with caution, intuition with evidence, and speed with reflection. By the end of Chapter 3, the central lesson emerges clearly. Human minds are storytellers by nature, seeking coherence even when reality is uncertain. Overconfidence is an inevitable byproduct of this cognitive architecture. Understanding its sources, recognizing its manifestations, and engaging deliberate reasoning are essential steps toward making wiser choices. Egan positions this chapter as a bridge between the mechanics of heuristics and the practical implications of intuition and judgment, a foundation for understanding the limits of human reasoning while harnessing its strengths. Chapter 4: Loss, Risk, and the Emotional Cost of Decisions. Chapter 4 of Thinking, Fast and Slow delves deeply into the human mind's complex relationship with loss, risk, and reward, revealing how emotion often overrides logic in the decisions we make. Patrick Egan examines how the brain's dual system structure influences financial choices, personal behavior, and broader social decisions, and why people so frequently act in ways that contradict classical notions of rationality. At the core of this chapter is the principle of loss aversion, the idea that losses loom larger than gains, and its profound consequences for how we evaluate risk, anticipate regret, and pursue happiness. Egan begins by exploring the emotional asymmetry between gains and losses. Humans do not experience value linearly. The pain of losing $100 is typically stronger than the pleasure of gaining $100. This imbalance is not a trivial quirk. It shapes behavior at every level. Investors hold onto losing stocks for far too long, hopping to break even instead of cutting losses, while simultaneously selling winning assets too early out of fear that gains might vanish. System 1 reacts instinctively to the fear of loss, triggering immediate emotional responses that System 2 may struggle to override, even when careful analysis suggests a more rational choice. This psychological phenomenon explains many behaviors in everyday life. Egan illustrates it with examples ranging from gambling to retirement planning. People often take irrational risks to avoid losses, even when the odds are against them. Conversely, they may become overly conservative in situations where a calculated risk would be beneficial. This duality underscores the subtle ways in which our emotional responses hijack rational thinking, influencing not only financial decisions, but also career moves, relationships, and health behaviors. The fear of regret, the anticipation of negative emotion if things go wrong, drives many of these choices, often subconsciously. Egan then connects loss aversion to framing effects, showing how the presentation of choices dramatically influences behavior. A medical treatment framed as having a 90% survival rate is far more appealing than one described as having a 10% mortality rate, even though the statistics are identical. System 1 responds to the emotional tone of the framing, while System 2 may fail to adjust adequately for the underlying reality. The chapter emphasizes that understanding how options are framed and how our intuition reacts to them is essential for both personal decision-making and influencing others ethically. Risk perception, as Egan explains, is also heavily influenced by probability weighting, another insight from prospect theory. Humans do not evaluate probabilities linearly. Extremely small probabilities are often overestimated, while moderately high probabilities are underestimated. This explains why people fear plane crashes but ignore everyday driving hazards, why lotteries attract disproportionate participation, and why insurance markets thrive on policies for unlikely events. Our intuitive System 1 exaggerates rare dangers, while System 2's analytical powers are frequently underutilized or overridden by emotional instinct. Egan further explores the concept of mental accounting, showing how people evaluate gains and losses in isolated categories rather than considering the overall impact on wealth or well-being. For example, finding $50 in a jacket pocket may feel like a windfall, while losing $50 from one's wallet evokes the sting of loss, even though the net change is identical. Similarly, individuals often treat bonuses differently from regular income, spending found money freely while budgeting conservatively from earned income. These compartmentalizations highlight the subtle ways in which intuition and emotion structure our perception of value. The chapter also examines regret and counterfactual thinking, the mental exercises of imagining alternative outcomes and what could have been. Anticipated regret influences choices even more than actual outcomes. System 1 reacts strongly to scenarios where loss or failure seems likely, pushing people to act conservatively or avoid new ventures altogether. Egan emphasizes that while regret is adaptive in some contexts, guiding learning and self-correction, it can also be paralyzing when overgeneralized, leading to missed opportunities and overly cautious decision-making. Egan illustrates these concepts with real-world experiments and case studies, showing how loss aversion manifests in markets, health decisions, and personal life. In investing, for example, traders consistently underperform due to the emotional weight of losses, while overconfident participants ignore objective probabilities. In healthcare, patients often overweigh potential side effects while underestimating the benefits of treatment. Even in daily life, decisions about education, career, or relationships are heavily shaped by the desire to avoid negative outcomes rather than maximize positive ones. The pattern is clear. Emotion, intuition, and context drive choices far more than abstract rationality. Finally, Egan explores strategies for mitigating the negative influence of loss aversion and biased risk perception. Awareness is critical, but structural interventions are even more powerful. By reframing choices, segmenting decisions, creating pre-commitments, and using probabilistic reasoning, individuals can engage System 2 to counterbalance System 1's emotional impulses. For instance, automatic savings plans, diversified investment portfolios, and decision checklists can reduce the emotional weight of loss, allowing rational assessment to guide actions. Over time, recognizing the patterns of bias and systematically counteracting them becomes a habit, improving decision quality and reducing unnecessary stress. Chapter 4 closes with a profound insight. Human thinking is neither fully rational nor irrational. It is predictably emotional. Understanding the psychological mechanisms behind loss, risk, and regret allows us to anticipate errors, design better strategies, and make decisions that align with long-term goals. The chapter underscores a recurring theme in Egan's work. The mind is a blend of speed and intuition, logic and emotion, pattern recognition and analysis. By appreciating these dynamics, we gain the tools to navigate life more intelligently, reduce avoidable mistakes, and harness the power of both cognitive systems. Chapter 5: Choices, Happiness, and the Long Game of Thinking. Chapter 5 brings together the insights from the previous chapters, focusing on how the interplay of fast and slow thinking shapes the choices we make, the satisfaction we derive from them, and the way we plan for a fulfilling life. Patrick Egan emphasizes that understanding the mechanics of our cognition is not just an intellectual exercise. It is essential for improving decision-making, managing risk, and ultimately enhancing well-being. This chapter explores how the lessons of heuristics, biases, overconfidence, and loss aversion converge to influence the quality of our lives, both in the moment and over the long term. Egan begins by examining how our minds perceive and evaluate happiness. He introduces the distinction between the experiencing self, the part of us that lives through events in real time, and the remembering self, which reconstructs memories and evaluates experiences afterward. The remembering self often dominates our perception of life satisfaction, shaping the narratives we tell ourselves about our past and guiding future decisions. System 1 operates primarily in the experiencing self, responding to immediate pleasure and pain, while System 2 mediates the remembering self, analyzing outcomes and forming judgments about what matters. This duality explains why we may endure an unpleasant experience if it promises a memorable or meaningful reward later, or why we might avoid a risky opportunity despite its potential long-term benefit. The chapter delves into temporal inconsistencies in decision-making, showing how people overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue long-term benefits, a phenomenon known as hyperbolic discounting. System 1 craves instant gratification, pushing us to choose pleasures or conveniences that provide immediate emotional payoff. Meanwhile, System 2, aware of long-term consequences, struggles to enforce discipline and delayed rewards. This tension is evident in choices about saving for retirement, investing in health, or pursuing education. The short-term pain of effort often outweighs the long-term gain in our perception. Egan underscores that recognizing this cognitive tug-of-war allows individuals to design strategies that protect long-term goals, such as automatic savings plans, commitment devices, or structured goal setting. Egan revisits the concept of loss aversion, extending it to the realm of life choices. People often avoid opportunities due to fear of regret, failure, or social judgment. This avoidance is particularly potent because System 1's emotional responses are immediate, vivid, and difficult to counteract. However, the remembering self may later regret missed experiences more acutely than minor losses endured. Egan emphasizes that awareness of this bias is crucial for making courageous, meaningful choices. By anticipating regret and reframing potential losses as learning experiences, individuals can reduce the paralyzing influence of fear and make decisions aligned with their values. Another central theme is the role of expectations and adaptation in shaping satisfaction. Humans are remarkably adaptable. The hedonic impact of gains and losses often diminishes over time. System 1 responds strongly to change, while System 2 monitors and rationalizes these shifts. Egan explains that understanding this adaptation can help manage desires and expectations. For instance, purchasing a luxury item may bring a temporary surge of pleasure, but the brain quickly normalizes to the new standard, leaving long-term happiness largely unaffected. Similarly, setbacks can feel devastating in the moment, but are often less impactful over time than anticipated. Recognizing the transient nature of emotional responses allows us to make more rational, strategic decisions about how we allocate time, money, and energy. Egan also explores the importance of structuring choices to reduce bias, drawing on lessons from behavioral economics. By designing environments and decision frameworks that minimize the influence of System 1's shortcuts and biases, we can improve outcomes. Examples include breaking complex decisions into smaller steps, using checklists to counter overconfidence, diversifying investments to manage risk, and reframing choices to emphasize long-term benefits. System 2 becomes a tool not just for analysis, but for governance, monitoring and correcting the impulses of System 1, while ensuring that our emotional instincts are harnessed constructively rather than destructively. Finally, the chapter emphasizes the practical implications for life and policy. Egan argues that understanding fast and slow thinking can inform personal development, education, finance, healthcare, and governance. Individuals who recognize their cognitive biases can make better choices, achieve greater self-control, and experience enhanced satisfaction. Organizations and policymakers can design interventions that nudge people toward better behaviors, such as increasing retirement savings, improving health outcomes, or encouraging environmentally sustainable decisions. The insights of dual system thinking are not theoretical curiosities. They are tools for shaping behavior, improving decision quality, and promoting well-being on a broad scale. Chapter 5 closes with a unifying message. The human mind is a combination of speed and intuition, emotion and reason, instinct and deliberation. Both systems, fast and slow, have strengths and limitations. Mastery comes not from rejecting intuition or suppressing emotion, but from understanding them, knowing when to rely on one system over the other, and structuring decisions to mitigate predictable errors. By cultivating awareness, engaging in deliberate reasoning, and designing environments that support thoughtful choice, we can navigate the complexities of life more effectively, make smarter decisions, and ultimately align our actions with both our immediate needs and long-term goals. In essence, Egan presents a roadmap for conscious living. Understanding how we think allows us to think better, make wiser decisions, and create a life that balances instinct with reason, emotion with analysis, and immediate satisfaction with enduring fulfillment. The book concludes not with a prescription for perfection, but with a practical philosophy. Human cognition is powerful, fallible, and predictable, and by studying it, we can harness its potential while minimizing its pitfalls. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you did, welcome to our book family.